I want to tell you the origin of one of the most important strategy game franchises of all time. And because of that, I need to talk to you about Australian media, about historical preservation, about the artificiality of meritocracy, and to do all this, I get to talk to you about a rubbish game with giant missile-launching crabs in it. I get to do that because I decided the thing I want to use to talk to you about complex ideas in media is the wonderful, bountiful, ridiculous art form that is video games. Specifically, PC video games from the previously lost void of the 1990s. You know, that period of time where all the good games came from, rather than on those console things that I never owned and therefore can't possibly have been important. Part of why I get to do all that is because these games were playable, with work, even as technology moved on. People could take the software, this wholly contained entity, from a disc or a CD and find ways to make it work, because all that needed to work was there, again, in that box. When games were released back in those days, there was only a limited ability to patch the games, and if a game failed to work out of the box, companies were on the hook to pay to send the buyer an updated disc to make it work for free. This was because games were things that had a container and a boundary. Things have changed since those days. These days, it's entirely possible that when a game doesn't work or doesn't keep providing monetary incentive to the people who are paying to keep it around, they can do something to make the game simply inoperable. Some games can't be bought, but worse than that, there are games that can be bought and can't be played. Someone shuts down a server, and even if the game doesn't strictly need it, every copy of that game in a bin somewhere is now bricked, and people warehousing it have nothing they can do about it. The games are dead, and someone killed them. When you dig into the history of most art forms, there's a slow, vague dissolution of records until we hit scrawled signs saying, "Here be dragons." When it comes to film, we're pretty confident that roughly half of all film from the silent era is just lost, and all the record keeping and attribution is deteriorated and badly kept, and it sucks. Some of the most important books you've ever heard of from history are constructed out of fragments of fragments. In most forms, more art has been lost than saved. Video games by definition didn't exist until we already had digital note-taking material, and the task of making them often included more notes. Thanks to a combination of existing privilege structures and the inherently replicable nature of internet data, there are parts of the history of video games that are preserved remarkably well. There are some times when the spread of video games can kind of look like a sort of cladistic model of speciation. First-person games tended towards RPGs, until the release of The Catacomb Abyss, and perhaps also Tank Fight. Then we got Wolfenstein 3D, and from there, id Software expanded into its family of Doom, while leaving behind spin-offs of the Wolfenstein engine like Shadowcaster, and you can get this whole little lineage of interconnected nodes, all seen in depth in the Children of Doom series by Campster, which is very good, and I recommend you go check it out. You can also pinpoint sparks that light up entire genres. Engine licenses, design inspirations, tech breakthroughs. In the 90s PC market, these sparks created dense clusters of related games, sometimes from technology that was not related at all to what the game was. One cluster, one relentless and undying form of what is still probably the most PC of all PC games, is the cradle of League of Legends and StarCraft 2, the genre of real-time strategy games. Before 1992, war games were slow, turn-based affairs. Think Battle Isle. If you can't think Battle Isle, go check out Battle Isle. It's really good. Then Westwood gave us Dune 2 in 1992. Blizzard followed that with Warcraft, 1994. And Westwood struck again with Command & Conquer, 1995. At that point, the market decided it was time to have a seemingly bottomless appetite for infinite knockoff junk, and a lot of companies sprung up, ready to provide. Even here, in Australia. That's right, folks. We're going to talk about real-time strategy games from Australia. Not that one. And not that one either. No, there was a third one. Crush, Kill and Destroy, and in this case, Extreme, which is mostly just all the patches and internet content, is a 1997 real-time strategy game firmly in the model of Command and Conquer, with minimal interface and minimal specific control of your units. You get animated videos of various actors who absolutely had starred in Neighbours and Home and Away at the time, and they told you what we'll politely call the story of the campaign. At some point in around 50 years in the future from then, so 20 years in the future from now, all-out nuclear war ensues. Humanity will wipe itself out, what's on the surface becomes weird and big and bulgy, and the survivors emerge from their brand identity non-infringing vaults and start to fight each other for the control of the scarce resources that they can find. It's definitely a game brimming with personality, which is a real compliment of a mission. I wanted to come at this and be nice, but look, the campaign just doesn't grab me. I kept doing missions until there weren't any left. The final mission is only final because it's the last one. It's supposed to feel important, but it doesn't earn that weight. Sometimes I'm told I'm winning the war, then suddenly I'm losing, unless I win this mission, in which case I'm back on top. Then the enemy's retreating, and if I win just one more mission, we win everything. The ending is less of a climax and more of an arrival. Basically, have you ever played a Fallout game? Well, imagine the forum roleplay of that extended for 10 hours by people who haven't played the game in 5 years. The entire interface is made of fly-out buttons on the side and your mouse cursor. The fly-out buttons relate to your production queues, not anything specifically selected unit is capable of doing. Everything a unit can do is context sensitive. You click a unit, you click empty space, the unit knows it needs to move there. You click a unit, you click an enemy unit, and it knows it needs to attack it. Within the bounds of the AI. We'll talk more about the AI, but it's not good news. This isn't the most limited interface I've ever used, but it is pretty close. It feels very Command and Conquer. Units are expected to handle all their interactions automatically, while I'm left managing the resources, building structures, and churning out units. The differences between units aren't about what they can do, but how they relate to each other. I usually associate this kind of design with games that have a small roster of very versatile units, where good strategy comes from figuring out how to combine them effectively and deploy them at the right time. Build orders, interactions between types, that kind of thing. That either means you want a wide variety of units with lots of specific interactions, or a very small number of units that are easy to manage in sophisticated ways. Bad news on that front. Fundamentally, Crush, Kill, and Destroy is a game that feels structurally obvious. Every unit has a direct parallel in the enemy side. There are a number of units split into vehicles and infantry, but they come across as like something designed by accountancy software. They all take this much oil, this much time, and pops out a unit that deals this much damage. It's all sliding numbers along a scale. Mechanically, the units just aren't very distinct, despite how interesting looking the mutant units are. They all have ranged attacks and just pew 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 at each other. I can't make them behave more strategically, and grouping them up by type is awkward. There's no real synergy, no debuffs, no weapon speed interplay. Nothing that makes combining units feel meaningful. I imagine someone with really good micromanagement might be able to make these units do something cool, but they're going uphill. Then there's the buildings, which is pretty straightforward. I need certain buildings to produce certain units, and I need other buildings to unlock more construction options that will let me produce other units. If I want to speed up unit production, I need to build more of the production building. Again, very Command and Conquer. It turns the whole game into a loop. Gather resources, build structures, churn out units, and figure out which ones aren't worth the effort. There's a sabotage mechanic where buildings can house defenders to stop infiltrators, but honestly, it's almost always more effective to just blow the building up. This lack of subtlety has its charm in a more direct game, but I feel it diminishes the feeling of strategy in a so-called strategy game. The largest units aren't typically worth it because the medium units do the job better for the price and time invested, and the weakest units were very weak indeed and not worth building once you have medium units. Battles are samey and tedious and tend to be about building up to the exact right threshold to win with, then going and doing that, because you'll pass the threshold where there's not enough oil left on the map for you to safely build up anymore. You probably have noticed by now that I haven't said much that's positive about this game. That's intentional because I need to be clear, this game isn't very good. It is wrought with an aura of midness. But maybe, if we look deeper at it, we'll find something fascinating, something beautiful in the fine details of the game's inner workings and design. Right? Maybe? Well, no, actually it looks worse. The AI, and I told you we'd get back to it, is incredibly basic. It doesn't know how to manage its own economy, and I mean, it is so basic that it does not know how to replace its resource total to pay for things. Instead of fixing that, which sounds very hard, the developers gave the CPU infinite money instead. You can't make mistakes about managing your money if you have infinite money. It's the Hilbert's howitzer plan. But was that simplified resource management in aid of ensuring the AI could focus on clever base design or deployment strategies? Also no. It meets the bare minimum and spends all the infinite money Zerg rushing the player with whatever units it can afford, which it knows how to find, because managing what the enemy AI does or does not know about is also hard. So instead of giving the enemy a fog of war, the game doesn't do that. It just knows where you are. It will send things to attack you, and you cannot do anything about it by preventing scouts. And you may think, I can counter that with a solid defensive line because the enemy is always coming from the same angle. Think again. See, their AI is dumb, so why would your AI be any better? Player units won't fire at enemies they see unless they're fired at first. Your enemy is sending units to attack your buildings, so they won't shoot at your units. Enemies will wander up to your buildings, and if you don't notice them because you're doing other things, they will destroy your buildings while your own units are emerging out of it, unless the enemy attacking unit is using something explosive with splash damage and accidentally hits one of your units in the process. In order to fix this, you have to micromanage every single unit in a defensive line, checking to see if there are enemies, and then telling your units to kill them. What makes this even funnier is this is a game where your units have an experience system and can level up and get better, but even the veterans don't think to shoot at the enemies walking past and blowing up your base. Look, it's pretty simple, and it's the term I've been dancing around the whole time. Crush, Kill, and Destroy is a mediocre rip-off of Command & Conquer. It tried to do things pretty much exactly the same way, except where it couldn't because it was too hard, so it did it worse. Under the hood, Command & Conquer actually had an elaborate script system to fake an artificial intelligence, to make your enemies do things that were more interesting than just Zerg rushing you. Crush, Kill, and Destroy doesn't. It's a dumb game without the trick to make it clever. Alright, dire computer opponent, kinda clunky interface, uninspiring story. Why care? What's the big deal? Why did I talk about this and not the other two much better Australian RTSs from the same time frame, Total Annihilation and Dark Reign? Because as the weakest of the three, KKND still has its own little place in history. See, KKND sold 600,000 copies. 600,000 units. This is an unreasonable pull for a game of such mediocrity. Far away in Britain, a guy called Tim Ansell, working for a company called Creative Assembly, saw those numbers and realized that it was incredibly easy to sell an RTS in that market. After all, a game like KKND sold, and that game sucks. Imagine if someone instead made an RTS that was good. Trying out this idea of an RTS but good, Creative Assembly began work on Shogun Total War, the first game in the Total War franchise, which has sold something like 36 million copies across 16 installments. We know this story now thanks to the efforts of fans maintaining Crush, Kill, and Destroy, which, if you believe what I've been saying so far, it doesn't deserve, but Tism has taught us it's frightening that you deserve the fans that you get, and those fans loved the game enough to keep wanting it, keep its name in people's mouths, and to keep producing stuff for it. Good Old Games picked it up, did the negotiation for the licensing, and now you can go buy Crush, Kill, and Destroy for money. That's good. Kinda. It's not that good. It's not my ideal situation. The game has an open source variant, but you still have to pay money for the assets to make it work, which means that the fans are maintaining and developing the game, making it a living thing. But if you want to experience this fan-developed version, the wild and free opportunity to develop and engage with a game that a company gave up on, you still have to pay someone who didn't make it for it. Personally, I figure if a company doesn't want to sell you a game anymore, they should be okay with it being distributed for free. because it clearly isn't enough profit to be worth asking for. This used to be called abandonware, and abandonware is rapidly shrinking because of the people who are now rent-seeking our long past. Even now, people making games that are due to become our history are making games to self-destruct over licensing, or profit margins, or even just issues of control. That's right, this whole video about a mediocre game failing so bad it created total war is just another person shouting about how we should stop killing games. That's right, baby, it's one of my ongoing beefs about games being given an actionable thing that you can do. The Stop Killing Games petition is an initiative to make the EU regulation consider if you stop selling your game in a way that makes it stop working, you're obligated to provide material for the game so that anyone who does want to can play the game or implement the hardware to make it work. It is a pledge to return to the state where at the very worst, a game was a thing you bought, and once you bought it, you had it, aka a purchase. What revolutionary technology from our ancient past. You don't have to sign it necessarily, by the way. I'm Australian, for example. I can't sign it. As I wrote this script, the petition screamed over the million signatures mark necessary, but you need a margin of error because there are going to be some fake votes in that. So, if you're in the EU, please go check out the Stop Killing Games petition, linked down in the description, and give it a sign if you haven't yet. This is such a weird thing to be talking about, because the initiative almost got shut down because people were big weirdos. Still, nice to see that meritocracy is definitely fake.